got shut down. I think there was a lot of fires. I think ceramics and fires have something going on there. But anyhow, so there was a lot of problems there. And then, of course, outsourcing to China. For China, it became a more prevalent thing. And so this shut down. But what's really great is that they had the foresight to reproduce a lot of these buildings. And they have a museum there, and then they got a bunch of money, and they built a really state-of-the-art studio for ceramic artists. So they've got this really historic kind of thing going on, where they have the old pottery factory and these really crazy old machines. Like, I don't know if you guys know about steampunk, but steampunk people would just lose their mind when they walked in there, because it's rivets and cast iron everywhere. And then they have this really cutting-edge ceramic department. That's a facility there. So right now, as I've already said, I'm sort of working towards making some work for a show and making some larger scale works, some wall pieces and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. So, okay, so that's pretty much the end of my education so far. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my heritage, because that's something that does come up, not necessarily, well, I think it comes up in the work. I think it's a pretty big part of the work. And so you'll just have to excuse the great icons I've chosen for my heritage. So I'm a naturalized citizen of Canada. I immigrated there when I was, let's see, I got to Canada when I was 5. We immigrated to Canada when I was 5. And my father is Chinese, and my mother is East Indian. And what's kind of interesting is that they were both born in Trinidad and Tobago. So my father is first generation Trinidadian, my mom's about 4th or 5th generation. Like, we figured that Dad's family kind of came over when Mao was coming down. Their family lived in the south of China, and so they were just like, we like Chiang Kai-shek, we don't like you. And so they kind of hot-footed it out of China, and they immigrated to Trinidad. And to make matters worse, I was born in Dublin, Ireland. So, I think, for the most part, I'm a pretty typical Canadian. So that's kind of a little bit about my heritage, and you can probably kind of see with this work, there was something that I saw really interesting about it. Now, this is an example of ormolu. The body of work that I do is called the manga ormolu. The manga is in reference to Japanese comic books and Japanese animation. That's what they call the comic books manga. And ormolu is in reference to this 18th century French practice, where they would bring in Chinese pots from China, the Europeans, and they would bring it in, and to make it more relevant to their own sort of aristocratic tastes and the royalty, they would gild sort of the foot and the top of it. So I think I've got some better images. So there's a little image of the foot, and then they would do the rim, and of course these little gold finials. I often refer to it as it looks like a cherub threw up on these pots, and they gilded everything. They ormolued everything. It was a really hot kind of thing. I don't know if you can see this, but this is like a Chinese Buddha, and they just got him all this real sort of lavish gold ridiculousness. So when I saw this stuff, I was really inspired. I was really captivated by it, and it wasn't necessarily because of the forms that they were recreating or the formal issues. It was kind of like the ideas behind the forms. I was really interested in ideas of hybridity and cultural appropriation. And in a lot of ways, I kind of almost saw myself in these vessels because, ethnically in my background, here I am sort of this Chinese East Indian, sort of Pan-Asian, I suppose I could call myself, person, but I've grown up in the West. And so a lot of the way I think and the way I approach things are very Western. And so when I saw these kinds of things, I felt like, well, there's something about this that's really quite interesting. Now, while I was looking at that stuff, as I said, this is an image of manga, and you can kind of see some of the comic books and stuff like that. And I was really interested in the robots that are kind of going on there. And, I grew up in a family of 4 boys during the first wave of Transformers, and there's me with Jazz, the Autobot, for those people who know. Which is funny because that's a lot of street cred for my students at university right now. Wow, picture with Jazz. And things don't really change. If there's a robot, I want my picture with it. So it's kind of a real fun fantasy for me in science fiction. So I'm going to show some of the earlier pieces here, and then we'll start talking about the actual work right there. The mango ormolu stuff really started off, I started doing them in porcelain, and I was doing them with decals, and they were really much smaller in size. And I was using commercial decals or decals that I would buy from these like little granny ceramic stores where you can go in and you can kind of paint the slick cast stuff. And it would, you know, those loofah frogs and stuff like that with the big gaping mouth. Anyhow, so that's where I got those decals from. And I liked it, but I felt like there was something about it that felt too commercial about the whole thing. And so I started looking at doing airbrushing the robotic parts with underglazes, and then trying to learn how to do the hand painting. So kind of glossing or, you know, going over lots of old ceramic books and trying to copy as best as I could those images that are on those vessels. And you know, while working on this stuff, I'm always thinking about appropriation, and it's really kind of a fun thing because within the ceramic context, appropriation is part of the whole bag. It's part of the whole history. And I've got kind of two examples. There's one up here, and this is Delftware, which is based in the Netherlands. And this is them copying Chinese ware, Chinese pots. And then below here, this is from Jinggajian, China, and it's a bowl depicting the crucifixion of Christ. And what I find really beautiful about those two things is that on the Delft one, there's still remnants of the dominant culture, the European sensibility. And no matter how hard they try to copy it, there still is some of that remnants. And it's the same thing with the crucifixion, the depiction of the crucifixion from Jinggajian, China, because like you can't really see it, but the two guys, there's two, I'm imagining they're supposed to be Roman soldiers, but they kind of more look like Confucius and, you know, some sort of Taoist character. It's really, it's a great sort of idea, or these ideas of hybridization kind of going on. The other thing I've often kind of thought about while working on work, and you can kind of see these are earlier works with the mango ormolu, where you know, there's the two separate parts that are kind of joined together. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But one of the things that was interesting about this body of work is our relationship to history and how history kind of works. And history, I see it more, I can almost fit it under information. And with a lot of this work, like the robotic parts can refer to technology. So what I was thinking while I'm working away is, you know, thinking about information and how technology is really shifting those ideas and changing those kinds of ways we digest it. And like, here's an example of, you know, people reading books. And, you know, you have your book, and it's heavy, and it's, you know, it's frustrating, and it's all these, you know, there's something quite romantic and nostalgic about it. But now, of course, we've got all these things like the Kindle, and we've got, of course, the iPad, and how that changes how we all digest or consume information is really kind of interesting. And also, how does that change how those historical texts are being presented? And I recently saw a video of I guess it's an app that they created for the Alice in Wonderland book, and it's an ebook, and you can interact with the images. So they used all the same illustration, the printmaking illustrations, but they changed it. So like you can tilt it, and then like Alice will roll out of something, and all this sort of stuff. So it's really kind of interesting how we take such an old story and then we recontextualize it and we change it to kind of make, I don't know, to make it kind of more sexy. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm trying to make these old dusty Chinese pots kind of cool and sexy and more contemporary. So one of the other things that has kind of come up with the work, and it's more visible in this work than the earlier works where the vessels are more static, is its reference to the body. And with ceramics, ceramic practitioners often talk about things like we break the vessel up into body parts, and so we call the bottom part the foot, and then we have the waist, and then the shoulder, and then the neck, and the lip of the vessel. So it's like we're always kind of talking about these body references to the vessel, and it's kind of like a frame of reference for a lot of us.